The kingdom of Valora was bright and peaceful, full of people who worked hard and respected their queen. Her name was Alara. She was young but wise, strong but kind. Everyone loved her for the way she cared for the poor, the way she smiled when children brought her flowers, and the way her voice sounded calm even when others argued. Her long dark hair and clear eyes made her look like someone born for light and calm, not for war or greed. For many years she ruled alone, never taking a husband because she trusted no one near her throne. That changed the year the scholars from the western lands brought travelers from a far country to Valora. They came with gifts, stories, and knowledge of other ways of life. Among them was a quiet man named Daniel. He was not handsome in the way courtiers were. He wore simple clothes and spoke softly. He looked like a man who spent more time thinking than speaking. Most men who stood before Alara would flatter her, speak about her beauty, and promise alliances full of gold. Daniel did not. He greeted her with a small bow and said only, "Thank you for allowing us to study your great city." Something in his calm manner caught her attention. For the first time, she felt someone saw her not as a queen, but as a person. In the weeks that followed, Daniel walked the gardens and wrote notes in a small brown book. He studied Valara's old ruins, its songs, and its ancient monuments. Sometimes the queen joined him, asking questions about the lands he had seen. He told her of wide rivers, endless plains, and towns built from shining stone. When he spoke, he always chose clear, honest words. He never made himself seem important. The court whispered that he was dull and harmless. The queen did not mind. She liked the quiet way he listened to her thoughts, how he never demanded anything. After long days of judging disputes and hearing arguments, she felt peace in Daniel's company. He reminded her that life could be simple. Months passed and their friendship grew into love. The people of Valora were surprised when Queen Alara announced she would marry a foreign scholar. Some said he would steal the throne. Some said she was blinded by affection. Yet when they stood together before the people, Daniel took her hand as though he had always belonged there, and the crowd grew silent. Something about his way of standing, steady, calm, protective, made even his critics unsure of their jokes. Their marriage was simple, filled not with grand talks of power, but with moments of gentle understanding. When Alara worked late in the library, Daniel brought her tea and told small bits of history to keep her spirits up. When she faced heavy decisions, he quietly shared his thoughts. Never with pride or pressure, always with reason. Soon the people began calling him the Soft King. They imagined him spending his days reading books and watering flowers. While the queen ruled the kingdom, Daniel never argued, smiled, and let them think what they wished. It seemed to him that peace was more important than pride. He had seen enough of the world to know that calm days were precious things. At times, his eyes carried a shadow of memory, but when Alara asked about it, he would say only that everyone has stories best left untold. Their small joys filled the palace. They watched the sun rise together from the balcony. They visited villages and spoke with farmers and children. The queen's laughter became more frequent, and her people said Daniel had given her heart rest. Even the guards, who once teased him for his gentle manner, began to like him for his humility. None of them wondered how he moved so silently through the corridors, or why the hilt of a sword was always near his desk, but never used. For 3 peaceful years, Valora bloomed like a garden. Trade grew, the fields were full, and the people believed their rulers blessed. Alara sometimes thought about how strange it was that her heart had chosen the quietest man in the palace to be her strength. She feared storms might one day return to the kingdom, but when she looked at Daniel, she felt safe, as though no danger could break the peace they had built. And Daniel, who had once wandered far through darker times, looked at her and found himself hoping that this simple life would last forever. He had seen kingdoms fall, armies rise, and men who believed that war made them powerful. But now, in the peace of Valora, holding the hand of the queen he loved, he believed that strength could live in silence and that maybe his sword would never need to see the light again. The calm days did not last forever. One evening, dark clouds gathered above Valora, as if the sky itself warned of trouble. The queen stood at her balcony watching the horizon, where strange lights flickered beyond the hills. Messengers came running with fear in their eyes. They said foreign armies were moving toward Valora. No one knew their reason. Some said it was for gold, others said it was for revenge. Whatever the truth was, danger marched closer each day. Queen Alara called her council together in the Great Hall. Men in bright robes and heavy chains spoke loudly, all giving different advice. One said they should send gifts to the enemy. Another said they must raise every sword and march to meet them. Alara listened, but felt lost in the noise. She looked at Daniel, who sat quietly at the far end of the table, his hands folded. He said nothing while others argued. Finally, she turned to him and asked what he thought. Daniel lifted his eyes slowly and said, "War should never be chosen quickly. Fear makes fools of wise men." His calm voice filled the room. For a moment, everyone stopped talking. But one of the generals laughed and said, "A scholar speaks of war now. Perhaps this man wishes to trade stories for swords." Laughter followed, rough and sharp. Daniel only smiled. Alara felt a sting of anger on his behalf, but he did not look hurt. He stood and bowed to the queen. "Forgive me. I speak only for peace. I will not stop others from doing what they believe right." Then he left the hall without another word. Later that night, Alara found him in the library, standing before a tall window. The light from the candles touched his face. He looked tired. "You are not angry?" she asked softly. "I have seen anger," he said. "It builds walls between hearts. I have no use for it." She came closer. "Then what should I do? If the armies reach us, many will die. I cannot let my people fall." Daniel turned to her, his eyes dark as stone. "Then you must stand strong. But do not forget that not all battles are fought with swords." She did not fully understand his words, but she felt a strange strength in them. The next week, the sound of drums rolled across the land. Smoke rose from villages near the borders. Refugees filled the city's streets. The queen ordered defenses to be built. Soldiers drilled in the courtyards and arrows were piled beside the towers. Every day brought news of more loss. During these days, Daniel became even quieter. He helped the wounded where he could, brought food to the soldiers, and repaired old maps in the hall. He never spoke of fear or escape. One night, while most of the palace slept, he rose from his bed, took a lamp, and disappeared into the darkness of the lower chambers. When Alara woke the next morning and found him gone, worry filled her. Hours later, he returned covered in dust, his clothes torn at the shoulder. She ran to him, asking where he had been. He answered simply, "Outside the city. I had to see something for myself." He would say no more. By evening, the enemy was near. The thunder of their march shook the ground. The palace trembled with panic. The council demanded the queen flee to the mountains where she would be safe. Alara refused. "If my people stay, I stay." Then Daniel spoke, his voice still calm but firm. "Stay within the keep," he said, "and trust me." Alara looked at him with confusion. "Trust you? You are no soldier. I will not hide while others fight." He held her gaze. "You believe I am only what I have shown. There are things about me you do not know. I made a promise long ago. It seems today I must keep it." Before she could ask more, the horn of war sounded. The eastern gate had fallen. Fire rose into the early dawn. The queen hurried to the wall with her guards, her heart racing. From the battlements, she saw chaos below. And then, through the smoke, she saw Daniel walking calmly toward the broken gate. He wore no armor, only his dust-stained clothes. He carried something at his side she had never seen before. When the light touched it, silver flashed like lightning. The soldiers hesitated. The quiet historian, the gentle husband, had stepped into the heart of battle with a blade in his hand. Lara could not move. She could only watch as the man she thought harmless strode forward into the storm, his figure straight and fearless against the fire. At that moment, she realized she might never have known him at all. The morning air was thick with smoke and fear. The sun tried to rise, but its light was hidden behind dark clouds and falling ash. The gates of Valora stood open and broken, and the sound of battle filled every street. Queen Alara stood on the stone wall above the city, her heart heavy as she watched her people run for safety. She could not take her eyes off Daniel. He walked through the dust with calm steps, as if the storm around him did not exist. The silver blade in his hand shone each time it caught the light of the fire. No one knew where that weapon had come from. No knight in Valora carried such a sword. It looked old, worn by many years, but still sharp and full of strange power. The invading soldiers saw him and laughed. To them, he was just a man in plain clothes, a scholar who looked too simple to be a threat. Then Daniel moved. Alara had never seen anyone fight like that. His feet were quiet and quick, his body balanced with perfect control. Each time his sword flashed, another enemy fell. He did not shout or boast, he did not even look angry. His face stayed calm, almost sad. It was as if he had done this before, many times, and hated that he knew how. The enemy tried to surround him, but he moved faster than they could think. He struck like a wave and slipped through them like wind. Within minutes, the soldiers near him were broken and silent on the ground. The rest began to step back, fear replacing mockery. From the wall, Elara's soldiers watched without speaking. None of them could understand how the quiet man who had been reading, in the palace garden only days ago now, fought with the skill of 10 men. When the crowd of enemies broke and ran, Daniel picked up a fallen flagpole and raised it high above his head. The symbol of Valora gleamed through the smoke. The city guards saw it, and their courage returned. They charged down from the towers, shouting the queen's name.
Ow!
For hours, the sound of battle rolled across the city.
Ow.
Daniel moved wherever the fight was thickest, never resting, never slowing. The men began calling him the Silver Flame. Even those who did not believe in miracles now swore they saw light follow his sword. By nightfall, the enemies fled beyond the hills, leaving their dead behind. The city gates stood again in silence, broken, but still standing. Queen Alara hurried down from the walls. Her guards followed but stayed behind when she crossed the field toward Daniel. The yard was full of smoke, the ground dark with blood. Daniel stood near the gate, his sword still in his hand, shoulders bent slightly as if the weight of the world pressed on him. When she reached him, he turned slowly. His eyes were cold, but soft again when they met hers. He looked tired, older somehow. The queen opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. He bowed his head. "It is done," he said quietly. "The city is safe." Alara shook her head. "Safe. You fought alone. You could have been lost." Daniel looked at the blade in his hand. "Better me than them. This was not the first time I have seen war, but I hoped it would be my last." She stepped closer. "Who are you, Daniel? You fight like a man trained from birth? You move like the stories old soldiers tell about heroes long gone." He gave a small, sad smile. "Why am what I tried to forget? Once I fought for men who cared only for victory. I carried blades for kings who thought a poor man's life was a small price to pay for their pride. When I met you, I wanted to leave that world behind. You gave me something better than peace, you gave me reason." Alara placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "You never told me because you wished to protect me from it." He nodded. "You needed a husband, not a weapon. And I wanted to be the man you deserved, not the one I used to be." They stood in silence. Far off, bells rang for the dead. The city was mourning, but also grateful. Soldiers called Daniel's name, cheering for the man who had saved them. Alara turned to watch the glow of the fires fading slowly. "They call you a hero," she whispered. Daniel looked out at the crushed battlefield and spoke softly. "If they knew what this blade has done, they would not cheer. Peace must be guarded, but I pray it can soon be guarded by someone other than me." That night, as dawn began to show on the horizon, Daniel cleaned his sword and placed it near the palace steps. The metal still gleamed under the early light. Alara knew that even if he never touched it again, the memory of that day would never leave either of them. His blade had saved her kingdom, but in his heart, it had also reopened every wound he had tried to heal. The city of Valora was quiet after the battle. The people cleaned the streets and rebuilt their homes. The fires had stopped, and the smoke was gone. Every corner of the kingdom showed signs of both loss and hope. The people whispered stories about the brave man who had stood alone against the invaders. Some said he was chosen by the heavens, others said magic guided his sword. But when Daniel walked through the streets, he did not look like a hero. He looked like a man carrying a heavy past. Queen Alara watched him from the palace balcony. Every morning he rose before dawn and helped rebuild the walls with the workers, carried stones, lifted wood, and spoke kindly to everyone, never accepting rest. When people thanked him, he only smiled and said he did what was needed. Yet Alara saw how tired he was. His shoulders drooped when he thought no one was watching. His eyes carried sadness that no sleep could fix. One evening, Alara found him sitting alone in the garden beside a small pond. The silver blade rested beside him, reflecting the gentle light of the setting sun. She walked to him quietly and sat next to him. For a while, neither spoke. The sound of water and birds filled the silence between them. "You angry with me?" Daniel asked at last. Alara looked at him with surprise. "Angry? You saved us all." He shook his head. "I broke the peace you built with your heart. You once ruled with hope, and I have shown your people that fear is stronger. I did not mean to bring blood back to your gates." She touched his hand softly. "You brought life back to Valora. Yes, there was blood, but without you, there would be no city left. You did what had to be done." Daniel sighed and looked at the sword. "I made a promise to myself long ago. I swore I would never raise this blade again. Failed that promise." Alara studied his face. "Was that promise made because of the wars you fought before?" He nodded. "I served under kings who believed that numbers and power made them great. I followed orders that left towns in ruins. I was praised for what I did, but I hated what I had become. When I left that life and met you, I thought I had escaped it. But peace is not something you keep by forgetting the past, something you keep by facing it." Alara understood now that Daniel's silence had always been the silence of a man fighting himself. His gentleness was not weakness, but control. He had buried the soldier within because he feared what would happen if it ever woke again. Her heart ached for him. That night the palace was full of joy, with music and feasts to celebrate the victory. People danced and sang in the great hall. Alara attended for a short while, smiling and speaking with her council. But Daniel was not there. She found him again on the outer wall, looking down at the city. "They sing your name," she said. He smiled faintly. "They sing because they are alive. That is all that matters. You could join them," she offered. "For once, let yourself breathe, Daniel." He looked out over the dark fields beyond the valley. "I breathe every day because you gave me that chance," he said. "But peace is not won with one battle. There will be others who test what we have built, and I fear what that will make of me again." Alara stepped beside him and rested her hand on his arm. "Then we will face it together. You are not alone now. Valora will rebuild, and one day no sword will be needed." He turned to her, and for a moment the tiredness left his eyes. "I hope you are right. When I fought out there, I saw not only the enemy, but the ghosts of my past. I do not ever wish to see them again." Days turned into weeks. The kingdom grew stronger. Farmers returned to their fields, children laughed in the streets, and trade ships came again to valorous ports. Yet the story of that battle spread beyond the borders. Travelers arrived, asking to see the man with the silver blade. Some wanted to learn from him. Others came to test him. Daniel welcomed none of it. He refused titles, refused gifts, and stayed close to the queen. Sometimes at night, he walked alone to the tower where the sword was kept. He would sit beside it, his eyes fixed on its shining edge. It was no longer the weapon of death, but a reminder. The guards who saw him said he never touched it again. He only sat there in silence, as if speaking to it without words. Queen Alara often watched him from afar and felt both sadness and pride. She knew the peace of Valora rested on his shoulders. But she also knew that beneath his quiet strength lived a man who wanted nothing more than to never fight again. To her, Daniel was not just the man who saved her crown, he was the man who had shown that courage was not only in battle, but in choosing to be gentle after knowing what war could do. Many seasons passed after the great battle, as the kingdom of Valora changed from a place of smoke and fear to a land of light and song. New homes stood where the old ones had fallen, and the sound of children laughing replaced the sound of swords. Life returned, strong and steady. Queen Alara ruled with kindness as she always had, but now her eyes carried more wisdom and a calm strength. Beside her, Daniel walked quietly, still the same gentle man, but one whose story had become legend. The people still told tales of him. Some said he could cut lightning from the sky with his sword. Others said his blade glowed because his heart was pure. But in truth, Daniel spent his days doing simple things. He worked with the builders, repairing the city's bridges. He helped the farmers clean their fields, sat with the children and told them stories about courage, never once speaking of his own. He did not like being called a hero. When men greeted him as one, he only smiled and said, "Peace needs no heroes." only protectors. His words spread through the land, and soon even the youngest child knew them. One morning, as the sun rose softly over the hills, Ilara found Daniel in the garden. He was kneeling by a patch of white flowers, trimming them with careful hands. The morning light touched his face, showing the lines that had slowly begun to appear. Time was moving forward. "Daniel," she said gently, "you should rest. The kingdom does not expect its king to work in the soil." He looked up with a small smile. "I am no king, Ilara. I am still the same man you met long ago, a traveler who lost his way and found peace beside you." She knelt down beside him. "And you gave peace to Valora. Without you, we would not be here." He shook his head. "Without you, I would still be lost." They stayed there for a while, listening to the wind move through the leaves. The air smelled of spring. It was a quiet moment, and it filled them both with warmth. Later that day, a messenger arrived from the border. He brought news that a small band of raiders had been seen near the outer villages, taking food and coins from travelers. The council wished to send an army, but Daniel said softly, "Let me go speak with them first." Sometimes words can solve what swords cannot. Ilara looked at him with worry. "It could be a trap, Daniel." He smiled gently. "Then it is good that I have learned to step carefully." She did not stop him, though her heart told her to. He rode out the next morning alone, carrying no armor, only a small pack and a short blade at his side. The people watched him leave in silence, knowing they owed their lives to him yet again. Days passed before he returned. When he came back, the raiders had vanished without a fight, never told anyone what he had said to them. But those who met him at the gate noticed that his hands were clean and his eyes calm. The peace of Valora continued. Years went by, the land grew rich again. Children born after the battle knew nothing of war except for the stories told by their elders. Daniel grew older, his hair touched by silver. He spent many quiet nights beside the fire, listening to Alara's plans for the kingdom. She spoke of schools and new roads and of opening trade with far lands. He listened with care and pride. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Ilara found Daniel sitting on the balcony with his sword across his knees. The blade still shone with the same pale light it had before, clean and bright despite its age. "You still keep it close," she said softly. Daniel nodded but did not look up. "It reminds me of what must be protected. It's not the throne, not the land, but the people. And you," she smiled. "And I am still that woman who once believed her husband was harmless." He laughed softly. "You were right to believe so. I only draw this blade when love gives me no other choice." That night, for the first time in many years, Daniel placed the sword back into its case and locked it. He stood for a moment, looking out over the city lights. Then he turned and took Ilara's hand. In the weeks that followed, Valora celebrated 10 years of peace. Bells rang through every street, and the people sang songs about hope. Daniel walked among them quietly, smiling at their joy. He felt no need to remind them of war. The children did not know it, and that was how it should be. In the end, Daniel was remembered not for his sword, but for his kindness. He became the pattern for every story told to young men about courage. The man who could have ruled with fear but chose love instead. When his time finally ended, the sword he once used was placed beneath the great oak in the palace garden. There it stayed, untouched, a symbol of a simple truth that everyone in Valora learned to believe. Peace is not given by power. It is kept alive by those who remember what they once fought for and who guard it with gentle hearts. And so, the legend of Daniel and Queen Ilara lived forever, not in battlefields, but in the quiet laughter of a kingdom that never forgot their love.